brought out alive. A tremendous outcome for the trapped miners in Chile. But what about the thousands of other miners around the globe? Will this successful rescue effort make any difference to safety standards in one of the world's most hazardous industries? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Laura Kyle. They spent more than 2 months underground, but on Wednesday, 33 miners in Chile finally emerged. Trapped 700 metres below the surface, the men had to cope with darkness, suffocating heat and humidity. Then an extraordinary rescue operation which captivated the whole world and was called nothing short of a miracle. Lucia Newman reports.
And then there were none. Luis Ursua, the shift supervisor who became the leader of the miners, was like the captain of a ship, the last to leave. An emotional moment captured by all of Chile and much of the world.
Each time I had the chance to hug the miners, they were so happy because they were experiencing a kind of rebirth.
The unprecedented rescue operation of the 33 miners trapped for 10 weeks at almost 700 meters underground was a feat of engineering and of resilience of the miners and their families. Like the family of Florencio Avalos, the first miner to emerge from the rescue capsule. Avalos' father, who had not one but 2 sons in the mine, says he feels 10 years younger.
My one son is very well in hospital. I've seen the other. He's calm, he's strong. So I'm very happy because this is what we wanted, to get them out safely. So now we can go home together.
But their lives will probably never be the same. Their experience and the unprecedented media attention will pose new challenges. Chile's president says those responsible for the mining accident will be held accountable, including government regulators. An incident whose unexpected happy ending has left this nation breathless.
For now, Chile is savoring the success of the rescue mission. It has, after all, been a drama whose unexpected happy ending has left no one untouched. Lucia Newman, Al Jazeera, Copiapó, Chile.
Well, it certainly has been the story that's had the world on the edge of its seat. And here to look at it some more, our guests in New Delhi, Sridhar Ramamurthy, a geologist and mining expert. In London, Dr. Eugene Gall, spokesman of the Society of Occupational Medicine. And joining us from West Virginia University, Christopher Bice, Professor and Chairman of the Department of Mining Engineering. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. An astonishing rescue effort. I'm sure, like all of us, you've been watching those emotional pictures of the 33 men being brought up to the surface. Christopher Bice, did you expect this rescue effort to go as smoothly as it did?
Well, I was guardedly optimistic. I think that people had the time to think things through. I mean, we're talking about a rescue that is unprecedented. I really was reassured when they spent time early on Tuesday night to make sure the capsule went up and down before they actually tried to recover the first survivor. So it made me feel pretty good that they took their time to do it right.
Dr. Gall, the men looked astonishingly healthy when they came out of that capsule. They were put onto stretchers, but a lot of them didn't look like they necessarily needed to. How do you think they managed to retain their health so well?
I think they've had very good support throughout the last 2 months. We know that they had very good communication and also supply line. And so therefore I think from surprisingly to all of us, actually, they had a very good support system down there and also above ground. If you ask me what conditions I would expect them to have on surfacing, I would sort of divide that into two categories. First of all, physical, and secondly, psychological. Physically, I think it's interesting actually that some people have commented they are probably fitter now than they were before they went in. They certainly haven't had as much alcohol or smoking, and they had more exercise. But what you would expect on the first examination is probably some respiratory disorders, because it's humid down there, and we do know that 2 miners have had respiratory infections. Some of them had dental problems, again, probably issues that they've had from before this incident. And lastly, I think eye irritations have been reported, which is not surprising when you consider the amount of dust and debris that was down there. Coming to the psychological condition, I think there's obviously a feeling of elation at the moment, and that's just such wonderful news. And I would expect the miners, the first thing they want to do is have a big meal, have an alcoholic drink, and spend lots of time hugging their families and friends and breathing the fresh air. But naturally, after such a high, a low will follow, and some will struggle with this, whereas others will do better. And I would think, just as a couple of general points before I come to specific, there's obviously some unfinished emotional and financial business which many of the miners will have to deal with. There's the pressure of the media. There is what seems to be an unclear situation, the 17 days before they were actually found, which will affect them to a degree that was not known yet. And lastly, they will have a loss of camaraderie and of group support, which they've enjoyed until now. And I think the important thing is to recognize that they all have individual reactions to this, and it is normal to a certain degree to go through emotions such as anxiety, panic attacks, possibly recurrent nightmares, detachment, and all this would be regarded as normal as long as it doesn't interfere with their lives and it doesn't go on for too long.
You would expect them, however, to have a whole wealth of support, given the amount of media attention, again, the amount of attention on these men. They probably will have all the support available to them.
You're absolutely correct. This is a unique situation. I would wish that such support was available to all workers throughout all industries worldwide. Unfortunately, we do know that occupational health support or health and safety is not always as predominant as it should be, and even in industrialized countries, only about 15% of all workers have access to health at work services. But I think in the case of these miners, they will have all the expertise and all the support that they can get, and I'm glad you brought this up, because it is easy to be cynical about this, but I think the president of Chile has got a very crucial role in the future of support for workers throughout Chile and maybe even worldwide in that particular industry.
Absolutely, and this is a point I wanted to explore further. Sridhar Ramamurthy, once this air of celebration dissipates, people will be demanding answers. Who do you think is going to be taking responsibility for this incident?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's been a stupendous task, and we are all happy. In the initial few days, there was some apprehension, and I think as the days progressed, it looked that all these people would be safe. But as you rightly point out, the question is much larger. Why do we run into situations that need such rescue operations? And also, what will be the future of mining of these kind of industries?
It does appear that it's small and medium-sized mines that, in this country particularly, that don't meet safety standards acceptable to international levels. So is it the responsibility, is it the fault of the mine, or is it the responsibility, the fault of the government regulators in this instance?
I think the primary responsibility, of course, is the miner himself. He has to be responsible about his mining activity. But then globally, the regulators have also been very weak. We find not only in Latin America and almost all the emerging economies, you will find that regulatory activities are very weak, and therefore you find that any non-compliance is compounded by not having regulators who are strict, who ensure that such kind of situations don't happen. But the other important thing is now, it's been proven that we have technology, this kind of situations can be dealt with. Perhaps there would be more better rethinking on how underground mines are planned, whether we need to pre-plan certain kinds of exit routes in case we have difficult geological situations. I think there would be different ramifications for what has happened, and I think that is going to be crucial to keep up this momentum. As we know, while we are celebrating this, there is also the huge kind of ash pond, the red mud pond in Hungary, which broke down and it's going to pollute the Danube. So we find that the safety standards across globe needs to be rethought.
Christopher Bice, is safety primarily the responsibility of the miner?
It's a combination of the miner, the operator, and the regulators. We have to realize that this mine was initially developed in the 1880s. So the technology in the 1880s is not current technology. They mined many years and then walked away, and a secondary or tertiary mine operator came in, and so the original mine design was done with 100-year-old technology. Well, I just say that's the way I look at mine safety as being a proactive steps through regulators, through operators, and through the miners themselves. And if you said, 5 days before this incident, would you say that the mine regulations and the enforcement of mine regulations in Chile is adequate?
Dr. Gall, miners at this mine long complained about the safety standards. Do you see this being a common problem in this industry?
That's an interesting question. I must admit that it's been some time since I've worked in the mining industry, and I think it is important to recognize that the miner is really not in a position to establish his views and his authority in this complex process. I think it is quite clear that there are economic pressures on the operators and economic pressures on the miners. And I think the miners have got less reserves, and you will have noticed that many of the people, of the miners that have come out are miners by default. I understand one of them is a footballer that has fallen on hard times and needed to go to work and earn some money. So I'm not really I personally don't think it would be right to say it is the responsibility of miners. What the miners need to do is, if they felt that they were working in unsafe condition, they would have to voice this and make it quite clearly known to the safety representative and take a stance. However, I think more importantly is really that the operators act responsibly. And who are the operators? I mean, when you look at President Pinheiro from Chile, you get the feeling that this would be somebody that should be running in a mine. He takes an interest in his staff, he protects them, he realizes that healthy miners, safe miners is good for business. And that's what operators need to realize. They need to realize that having good safety procedures, looking after your workforce is good for your business. And in that sense, the regulator would only have to come and do a tick box exercise. But unfortunately, that is not something that is universally acknowledged by the people in charge.
Well, there's no doubt that mining is indeed a dangerous profession, and in some countries more than others. China, for example, has a particularly notorious record. More than 2,500 miners were killed there last year alone. This number is so high partly because China does have the world's largest mining industry, but also because of its poor safety standards. The situation has been improving, however. The death toll in China is down from a peak of 7,000 in 2002. And in the US, back in 1907, more than 3,000 miners died. But this year, to date, there have been 60 deaths. And in South Africa, the number of mining fatalities dropped by about 25% during the first 9 months of this year. That's compared to the same period in 2009. Certainly, the numbers show there have been improvements in mining safety. Some experts are even going so far as to say you're more likely to get hit by a car on the way to the mine rather than die in it. Sridhar Ramamurthy, are you satisfied by these advances?
No. I think First is no, the kind of regulatory and operator responsibility in this has to be much higher. Then particularly in countries like India or many Latin American countries, and you mentioned about China, there's a very massive expansion. Do we have the kind of commensurate safety and other things to go with it? Because we are seemingly, for instance, India is planning to double its coal output in the next 10 years. But already we know that there are regulators in short supply. So how do you manage when you need to be expanding fast? Then second thing is as we look for more minerals and they are becoming available in more dangerous and deeper places. So the future of mining is not going to be easy. It's going to be into even tougher terrains, into deeper areas. So I think we need to gear up in this new context. And this is a milestone that I think globally we should look forward to improving these standards. And probably if need be, because today there are global operators, and we also may need global regulators in order to ensure that there is a minimum standard that's across the globe.
Well, certainly the last man out of that Chile mine, Luis Zura, said that he hopes that this will never happen again. But Christopher Bice, it will, won't it? Because there where you are in West Virginia back in April, there was an explosion of the upper Big Branch where 29 miners were dead. And I'm reading that just very recently that mining company failed yet another inspection.
Well, when it comes to an industry like mining, it is a risky environment. I grant you. There are other industries that are just as risky as mining, in fact, some even more so. And that's why I say mining companies have to be proactive. For example, I worked at one of the safest coal mines in the United States when I first graduated from school, and we had 3 ways of getting out of that mine in case of an emergency. In fact, one of the access ways or egress ways had its own capsule in the shaft. So even though we were only 650 feet below the surface, if we couldn't get out the main escape way, we had a secondary and a tertiary way of getting out of the mine. I think that's a regulation that we should take immediate look at in some of these mines in Chile.
Why is it that certain mines around the world, particularly in places like China, perhaps India, just seem to refuse to adhere to these safety standards? I mean, we're hearing in China that the government is insisting that managers go down in the mines with the miners. The mining companies are then suddenly promoting miners to statuses of manager. They don't seem to be wanting to improve the conditions for their employees.
Well, safety requires a culture of safety, a thought process of safety. Whenever you do something, you shouldn't just look at it as production and, oh yes, we'll try to do it safely. No, it's safe production. Whenever you come up with a mine design, whenever you come up with a system, you've got to consider the safety of doing it just as much as in the production. And I think that some countries, some companies might not look at safety in that manner.
Sridhar Ramamurthy, for those of us who know very little about this industry, can you explain to us just how these types of accidents happen and just how easy it is to prevent them?
Yeah, you see, perhaps if I begin with China, China has geological context is a little different. They have a lot of gaseous mines, so there is sudden explosion that happens. Unlike India, which has shifted largely to open cast mines. So we have different kinds of problems in underground mines and open cast mines. Underground mines become vulnerable the moment we go below the water table. So we have the additional problem of water pressure being there. So there is likelihood of different kinds of collapses. We have had accidents in Indian coal mines like that, where it's flooded the whole mine and people have lost their lives. But in each of these cases, you find that there is a gross violation of some of the basic kind of safety understanding. if we look at some of the coal mines, and as I said, in China, in the mine planning and design phase itself, you are in a hurry, to start work, and you are not looking at what are all the risks that are there. So quite often risk mapping is inadequate. Even our own Director General of Mine Safety says many of them, when you look at their safety kind of manuals and other things, they seem not very practical. So there are lots of areas where there is improvement, but it has to be across board, because it's not merely having some standards. But at the end of the day, I think we need our regulators and those who are responsible for ensuring compliance to be constantly on their feet, because we will have situations in mining context. Similarly, when we look at very huge machinery that's being used in open cast mines, even in open cast mines in India, every 5 to 6 million tons that we mine, we lose a person. So it's not that it's become the technology or the processes have improved so that we can have like zero fatality kind of mining. So therefore it becomes even more important that as Professor pointed out, it's safe mining rather than safety as an add-on.
Dr. Gaul, just to touch on something that we focused on before, the mental health of men who get trapped in these mines. Do you think they will actually be returning underground?
From what I've heard through the reports, this seems unlikely. However, I think the responses will be individual. Certainly, I think the older members will not want to return. However, the younger ones will have to ask themselves, what are they going to do with the rest of their lives? And certainly, I think the very careful character who came out second has already pronounced that he is a miner. That's what he knows, and that's what he wants to do. And I certainly wouldn't have any hesitations of allowing anyone going back to that activity if they felt that they were able to do so. I think you will see that this is a life-changing event for all of them, and some of them will take it and change their lives for the better, and that does not necessarily mean changing their work, but others will crumble and they will not be able to go back to this kind of work and will need support in finding other occupation.
Certainly a life-changing event, and for many miners all over the world will be hoping for changes to the safety within their industry. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Dr. Eugene Gaul in London, in West Virginia, Christopher Bice, and in New Delhi, Sridhar Ramamurthy. Thank you. And thanks to you too for watching. If you want to get involved in any of our discussions here on Inside Story, just email us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. See you next time.